and I say this for myself as a father too, we play a very pivotal role in our families and the upbringing of our children. Your children will learn from your behavior, both good or bad behaviors. So we must know how important we are in the leadership of the household. Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Catholic Parents Online. I'm John Hui and I'm your host for this series. Today we are going to talk about how to be better fathers. So for the fathers out there, this is for you, but for the mothers out there, you're not excluded because that involves your husbands too. So listen in, and if your husband isn't here, just get them in, all right? Okay, I'll show it to him afterwards. Now, today, once again, we are very happy to have with us Dr. Christopher Cheok, psychiatrist, senior consultant, and chief at the Department of Forensic Psychiatry at the Institute of Mental Health. So, with regards to fathers, I don't think he'll be speaking in his capacity as a forensic psychiatrist. Yeah. But we are very happy that he's with us nevertheless, and he is a husband and a father of
3 children.
3 children. Yeah. Okay, so thanks once again.
Three sons.
Your three sons. Yeah. Thank you once again for agreeing to be with us and coming onto our show.
Great to be here, John. Yeah.
Thanks. So, well, Christopher, looks like we're both in this boat of fathering.
Yes.
All right. And for myself, I'm grateful to be a grandfather too. And much has been said, right, about the role of fathers in the lives of children. All right. And it has been said that every father is his daughter's first love and his son's first hero, right? So how important really is the role of fathers in the family?
I think in the most ideal situation, I think the having a father and mother in a family would be the best combination, because the father has a role to play, the mother has a role to play. I think many of the lessons that children learn as part of growing up is not just from the formal instruction that we give them, but it's also from the observation of how their parents interact, how father talks to mother, mother talks to father, how the father treats the children, and as well as his behavior. So I think that they learn either subconsciously or just through observation what it means to be a father.
Yeah, I would agree with you, because I learned so much from my dad and my mom, and they showed their qualities in very different ways as father and mother. You know, my father was really a quiet guy, but he was really working very hard for the family. I remember him waking up early in the morning at 5+ and starting to prepare the coffee for the whole family. There were 11 of us in a little 2-bedroom flat, 11 children plus 2 parents. So, and that with 1 toilet. I don't know how we survived, but we did, thank God. Yeah, so, and then after that, after preparing breakfast for us, he would be working right through the day and right through the night, sometimes up to 12 midnight. And then he goes to bed and wakes up at 5+ again to prepare things for the family, and to just make ends meet for our family. And then my mother was there doting on us in her own way. Besides the housework that she was doing, she was really giving us the emotional support, and we knew that she was always there for us and we needed to. And I think they both showed very different aspects of parental love.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So
and they didn't have to tell you formally about things.
Yes. I mean, it was something which was imprinted in our minds, and something which we just took into us, and now we try to do the same with our children.
Yes.
Although I must say that nowadays, as fathers, we I think tend to talk more with our children. I would like to think. I hope.
I hope so too. But I think it's different from different families.
Yeah, that's right. My father's a very quiet man, and very quiet, but we could see the tremendous love and dedication he had for us. So I guess I'm coming from that point of view, from my own experience.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's right. So, but at the same time, I think we also recognize that there are lots of challenges and obstacles facing us fathers, right? That perhaps make it difficult for us to fulfill our role the way we would like to, and that really prevents us from being the fathers that I'm sure many of us would like to be, myself included, right? So I think when we were talking about this podcast some time ago, you're talking that there are actually quite a lot of challenges and obstacles that fathers face, right, in becoming good fathers, at least as good a father as we would like to be. So what are these possible challenges and obstacles that you see?
I think the first challenge, I guess, is is that we will never. I certainly didn't attend a course in my school to say how to be a good father.
Or in NS, right?
Or in NS, or in university. Yeah. So the first instruction we have as to what a good father is actually from our parents, as you mentioned before. But if we had the privilege of having good fathers and good parents and good mothers, then lucky for us. But not everyone has that privilege to have a good example to follow from their own life experience. The next challenge, I think, is really depending on the age of their father. So fathers can, of course, have a wide variety of age. And I think it is fair to say that us men, we have our own journeys in life. When we are teenagers, I think we want to learn about the world, we want to have fun, we want to discover, we want to have thrill.
Football first.
Football first, yeah. I think many men tend to be very self-centered. I would dare say selfish. In the earlier parts of their life.
Yeah, high five,
Yeah. And it's only when they get older, maybe past the midlife, that they can become more empathic and not be so egocentric. So really it depends on the stage of life that the person finds themselves being a father. It is quite understandable if someone in their 30s and 40s are very keen on working success in their career, because this is quite understandable from their life phase. So for a young father, it is actually very challenging, because at being when I say young father, it could be a late teen, a young adult. It could be very challenging because at that time the income is relatively low. I mean, you don't have much work experience.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
So that itself has challenges, and he probably would have to rely on his extended family to help in the parenting. If you find yourself being a father in your 30s or your late 20s, then you have to juggle being successful in your corporate and working life, and of course caring for your child. And of course, if you find yourself being a father in your 40s or even your 50s, then realistically our energy levels do drop.
I'm finding that out as a grandfather, attending to my grandkids.
So it really depends when you are a father. And I think that if a person becomes a father in their 40s and 50s, I think hopefully they're more empathic and more loving and giving, as I guess when you are very, very young and not so experienced.
Yeah, maybe they're so drained they'll say anything goes.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely true. I was a very young father, and in my mid-20s, my wife and I became parents, and I like to tell my wife that at that time we had hardly any financial planning, right? Hardly any finances and no planning.
Yeah.
So that's how it was, right? But I think given the environment we have today in the world, in society, there are a lot of expectations on men. Our focus is on men today, right? The fathers, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of pressure on fathers, to perform in the workplace, in the corporate world, and at the same time at home, right? Which is, of course, our duty and our responsibility. But at the same time, it can be very challenging, I can imagine, right? So, do you have any ideas or suggestions as to how fathers, right, can handle these pressures and challenges at both the corporate life as well as the family life?
I think as a couple, as parents, husband and wife, I think it is important to discuss your roles in the family. Depending on what is acceptable to the husband and the wife, whether it's a single income family or double income family, and even in a double income family, what roles are taken. I think it is important to have this negotiated and discussed. Because certainly raising a child is not easy.
Yeah,
in this
absolutely.
Absolutely. And as a young parent, you're also subject to a lot of influence, not just from the marketing, from media, but also your own friends.
Yes.
And especially if you're a first-time parent, you have a lot of hopes and dreams for your child, and then everyone's going to do this special class, this enrichment class and all that. You may just be caught up in all that. So I think it's good to really have both husband and wife really discuss what they really want, what are their expectations for the child, and agree on that, so that there is no role confusion, or that at least they are in sync with how they want to parent their child.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sometimes while the father and mother would discuss their roles and expectations, which is very good and very important, right? I can imagine that sometimes there will be situations whereby one of the spouses cannot fulfill those so-called responsibilities or duties that he or she is expected to fulfill, right? So I think in times like these, it will probably be likely that we'll need our spouse to help out and to understand. But like you said, it is very important that we communicate, and that when we are facing these situations, we should really want to communicate our feelings with our spouse, to let our spouse know what we're going through, so that our spouse will understand why we are unable to fulfill that role at that point in time. And then once again discuss, so this time, how can we now help each other fulfill that particular role that needs to be fulfilled for the sake of the child and the family.
I have seen a lot in life. In my career as a mental health worker, working in very different settings, both in public hospital as well as in addictions as well, and currently where I am in the prisons. I've seen many variations of parenting, but most importantly, I think is that I think every father comes from a different background, and I respect every father's choices if they have their needs to fulfill, but they do so in a way that is discussed, and I guess they need to, as you mentioned, communicate, and there's common understanding. Certainly, I think different fathers come from different backgrounds. So if you came from perhaps a low-income background, you had this great need to succeed, that drive for you to work hard is there. So we cannot fault the father for that. If you come from a different background, you may have different aspirations. Some people are just naturally competitive. Some people have high expectations. Some people are chill. Some people, want to take a more, I guess, relaxed life. So every person is different. But most important is that the two parents understand each other. Right. And then they can, I guess, negotiate the roles again to fit such that the whole family unit works
together. Yeah, that's right. And that's so important that we come together and share with each other, and pray together and discern what we should be doing in these situations. In fact, almost every day of our lives, right? We
Absolutely.
have to do that, Yeah, because life is so dynamic. There's so many changes happening at the workplace, at home, and our kids, and suddenly something happens, and then we have to attend to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's how exciting life is, right? As a father, right?
Tumultuous.
Yeah. Okay, welcome to the club. Yeah. Okay, so given the scenarios that we have today in society, are there examples or are there times which you've come across in your work or perhaps in your personal experience whereby there is a kind of a conflict between corporate expectations and home expectations, family expectations, and what can fathers do to find a healthy balance?
So depending on where you work, they have different requirements of the workplace. Especially in Singapore society, where we are quite international, we have a broad range of choices of work. I think most importantly is that the individual person, the man must know himself. They must know what they can take. Some people can take high stress. Some people cannot take stress. Some people can work in a fast-paced, competitive workplace. Some people can't. So one must know themselves. So I guess the first thing is to be able to find that fit between your personality, your energy level, your abilities to what your company expects of you. So if your company requires you, for example, to fly regionally or internationally, you must be able to cope with that, and your family setup must be able to cope with that sort of lifestyle. If you can't cope, then I think we just be realistic and choose a job that fits your family's needs. So again, it's really I think when we are young, we want to try our best and try everything, right? But I think when you become a parent, I think some of these decisions have to be made at some point or another. If not, then you will have tension.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. So I think you're so right. The importance of putting down priorities, right? What are our priorities? And really, the priorities are like God, spouse, children, family, right? And then work and community, right?
Yep.
So in more or less that order. And I think if we can get our priorities right, it is likely that we'll make the better decisions for the sake of the family as well as in work life. And like you said, if necessary, we may have to find a job which helps us to balance everything and not lose sight of our priorities in the family.
Absolutely. Yeah, and what you mentioned, at least the priorities that you said is very sensible. I think that it is useful for young fathers or even young men to learn, to know, at least to be humble enough to know there's something called learning about parenting, or even learning about setting your priorities, because these things are not taught in school.
Definitely.
And my parents never discussed all these things with me.
That's right.
That sort of thing. It was just not the way it was done in the past.
Right.
But I think that through teaching yourself or through books, we can learn to be a better father.
Yeah, mine has been mainly on the OJT, on the job
Absolutely,
training.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But even today, I'm still learning because I'm seeing how my own children parent their own children, so my grandchildren, and I see a slightly different style. They tend to be more, I would say, more empathetic, and they try to understand the children better, and they're more patient with the children than I was with mine. So I think they probably learn from that.
Yes. I mean, there's no 10-year series, perfect checklist, sort of way of parenting, but there are broad principles to follow.
Yeah, mine, I had the 10-year series with all the wrong answers. So I guess fathers do sometimes feel overwhelmed by the challenges they face, understandably, because the challenges in society, workplace, home, and maybe even other areas of voluntarism or in church and so on, sometimes they can take their toll on fathers, and fathers might feel overwhelmed, right? Do fathers tend to seek help when they feel these challenges coming upon them or overwhelming them, or do you think the fathers tend to keep to themselves and try to solve it themselves without turning for help?
John, you just hit on one of my pet topics about men's mental health. I'm actually very concerned for men's mental health because, as I mentioned, I worked in the field of addiction and in the prisons, and 9 out of 10 of my patients today are men in these sectors. It's not.
I wonder why, right?
Yeah, you wonder why, right?
Yeah.
I think most men, in general, do not seek help when they are stressed. They think they can go at it alone. My observations of guy-to-guy relationships tend to be guys would do activities with guys, and they would watch football with them, they would go and do their sports with them, but they don't necessarily have that heart-to-heart talk among guys until maybe in their later years. But in the early years, it's all about activity, all about discussing the topic of their choice, be it computers, games, watches, cars, football, sports, that sort of conversations. But this idea about turning for help isn't a natural instinct for many men.
Is there a reason why?
I think it's just how we are. I guess that's
our ego.
It's just our ego. Yeah, I think it's just our ego, and we are afraid. We just don't seek help. Broadly speaking, we don't seek help. Of course, some guys do, but the vast majority of men don't until they hit this real roadblock, this crash in the wall, and then they have no choice but to seek help.
Yeah, there's this rather common joke among Christians, right? That that's the reason why Moses got lost for 40 years, because he didn't ask for directions.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's not uncommon, because when we go traveling, right, I would tend to try to rely on my maps in the past before GPS, right? On my maps and trying to figure out where things are and all that. My wife would be quite happy to ask for directions and ask for answers to questions that she would have.
Yes.
She usually arrived at the answer faster than me.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is the same thing where I see in my workplace too. I think sometimes it's just as simple as asking for help. And people will be happy to help you sometimes as well. Yeah. So I think this is something that guys must unlearn. This, I think, about self-sufficiency, being prideful and egocentric. It's maybe a product of our culture and our upbringing, but I think it's useful if men are brave enough to relate to other men, to talk about some of the difficulties they have in their life, because some of the difficulties we have in life are universal. If you are a parent to a young child, you are a Grab driver on weekends. All of us share the experience of being a Grab driver on weekends to our children, right? I mean,
and grandchildren.
And grandchildren. My kid's PSLE is going to be released next Wednesday. Do I feel calm and collected? Of course not. You know?
But you look calm.
Yeah. But these are what I call. There is no. I guess embarrassment, shame, or anything to say that the PSLE results are coming out. It's quite stressful.
It is, absolutely, for every parent.
For every parent, I mean, so you don't have to say that. No, it's chill lah. No such thing. I'm just looking forward to Qatar World Cup. I mean, it's that's not being honest or being authentic.
I'm not, because I didn't pay the subscription.
Yes.
Don't tell the companies that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so how can fathers in a way be encouraged to look for help? Because I think, like you said, we have a certain ego, we have a certain kind of sense of self-pride, and we don't like to let people know that we are in trouble. We don't like to let people know that we need help. But how can men be encouraged to acknowledge this very obvious fact, right, that all of us need help in some way or other at some time or other?
Yeah, I think a good melting pot would be national service. That's when you actually get to meet people and go through a lot of I guess difficult experiences, and the true colors of people really shine through during national service.
You bet, man.
Yeah. I think it's through these experiences, shared experiences, that I guess we see people stress, we see people cry, and we see people get angry and all that. That I guess some of our vulnerabilities show. I think that's a good start if you have good buddies and bros from NS. But as we go on, I guess guys are naturally competitive. I think it is this unlearning that we don't need to always show that we need to be number one, we need to beat people, we need to win over people and all that. To understand that all of us are going on the same MRT train to the same destination. We have shared experiences, and it's nothing to feel embarrassed about. I guess it's easier said at our age that we pass the midlife, but it's harder, I guess, for a 30-something-year-old person to internalize. But I think it's at least good that people learn that guys should be should try to, I guess, relate to other guys, not just in activities or sports, but I'm sure most of our time our life is going relatively smoothly, but we should cultivate those type of relationships whereby we can be honest with our good friends to find that support. Because certainly, I think, coming from my experience, the way we communicate to our wives or spouses and we communicate to our guy friends are quite different. I can tell you that many people, from my experience at least, those people who enjoy reservists love to go back to reservists because they can relate to their bros in a very natural way that they can't do in a corporate.
Yeah, talk about the latest Star Wars movie.
So there's this thing that is this I guess environment that allows bros to be bros and that sort of thing. So and we need the outlet too, and it's not. I think it's perfectly alright to say that I need my bros.
I remember last time when I tried to introduce my wife to Star Wars, right? We were courting at the time when we were dating, so I brought her to watch a movie and Star Wars and everything was exciting, right? With all the fights and everything. Then I realized my wife fell asleep during the movie, and then the only time when she woke up was when it was over. And she said, "Oh, okay, what happened?" And I said, "Okay, we just went off the climax, and Darth Vader just had a duel with Luke Skywalker, and that's done."
I'm sure she'll take her revenge on you now with all the K dramas.
Oh, already done. Done that. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, we have different ways of relating. Whereas one time with my guy friends, we would just talk about the movies that we've been watching and Jurassic Park and so on and so forth. I remember there's another time when a patient was in my a couple was in my clinic room, and then suddenly his phone went off, and straight away I looked at him and said, "Oh, you're a Jurassic Park fan too?" And his wife turned to him and said, "Oh, that's Jurassic Park. I thought it was some orchestral music." And then both of us started talking about Jurassic Park.
Yes.
It's just different, but I think that's also important, right?
Yeah. But actually, for a guy from parenting, I think that is I think it's important to know that your children are looking at you. Certainly, if you're starting out and you need to work hard to get the finances right, I think it's perfectly understandable to work long hours to try to establish your financial stability. But if you're in a privileged position that you don't have to work so hard, then I think it's important to try to understand the needs of others within your family.
Especially spouse and children.
Not just yourself, but also your needs of your spouse, the needs of your children. The truth is that when children are young, they want to be with their parents. They want to play with their family. They want to play with their parents, both mommy and daddy. Guys look to their fathers as role models subconsciously. How you relate to them, how you act, how you conduct yourself to your wife, to them will leave this lifelong imprint on them subconsciously. So this is something that's very important to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you gave a very good summary of that. Well, and the role of fathers and what we should do, right? Number one, we have to acknowledge that everyone's different and we have different abilities, we have different gifts, and therefore don't expect ourselves to be able to perform in the same way all the time with others, right? And don't compete with others from that point of view, but rather just acknowledge where we are, know where we are, try our best in what we're good at.
And I think it's also, I say this to many parents, not just fathers, but also mothers. Don't project your unmet needs into your children. You may always have dreamt that you wanted to be a top athlete in your school, but you never made it. Don't project this unmet need into your child. You may always wanted to go into that particular course in your school or university, but you never did it. Don't project this unmet need into your child. Be sensitive enough to understand the special, unique abilities of your child, and nurture those abilities. Or else it's very frustrating for a child.
Absolutely right.
And some children's brains are wired in a certain way. Some they can't do certain things. Some children can do certain things. Every child is unique.
Yes, that's right. And I think also talking about the uniqueness of every child, I'm just reminded of the languages of love. All right, that we might speak certain languages of love more than others, or certain languages of love, touch or words of affirmation, service may appeal more to us, whereas our children, perhaps the love language might be more of gifts.
Yep.
Yeah. But if we think that, hey, look, this child's materialistic, always wanting presents and wanting gifts and all that, and then we start depriving them of these, and then saying that, hey, you should be like me, we should be doing this, and this is this is how I love it, this is how I experience love, and this is how you must experience love. And I think that is also another problem that we as parents might.
Absolutely. So one of the tips I can give all fathers, and I say this from the view of being a father myself, is to observe our children and see what makes them work, what makes them tick. It's not what makes me tick, but what makes the child tick, and be able to respond to that in a sensitive way. Just because I like football doesn't mean my child likes football. So we don't have to impose what we like onto a child. And my child would not be a mini me. He is his own individual self. Having said that, I think we should also set certain rules and boundaries and expectations in any household. Rules about courtesy, rules about how you behave at the dining table, your computer screen time and all that. I think it is perfectly all right to set certain reasonable rules in the family so that children learn that there are boundaries. In fact, sometimes it is more important that children understand where the boundaries are compared to when the boundaries are unknown or even worse, ever changing.
That makes them even more insecure.
Yeah, because you do not know, on one night it's okay to come back at 8 o'clock, on the other night it's not okay to come back at 8 o'clock. That sort of thing, it confuses them. Yes. So I think it's very important to set the house rules and be consistent in the house rules.
That is very important. So I guess for men, number one, we have to realize that we are unique, we are different in our own special way, and we just try our best. But at the same time, as we move along, we recognize that there are certain priorities we must have in our lives, right? God, spouse, children, work, and so on. And then, in that order, in a sense, right? And then really acknowledging that sometimes we do need help. Mm-hmm. And when we do need help, we'll need to turn to people who can help us if necessary. I mean, of course, we need to turn to God, but sometimes He sends instruments to us, and that might be our wives, our bros, and others in our lives, as spiritual directors and so on. We need to acknowledge that. But in this way, right, for the wives who are listening in, right, perhaps when the husbands do turn to them and share these vulnerable feelings that they have, share these vulnerable thoughts that they have, instead of telling them off, right, which I'm sure wives wouldn't do that, right, I hope. But how do you think wives can support their husbands when the husbands voice these weaknesses, so to speak, or vulnerabilities to their wives?
Actually, men's weakness is that their egos are very fragile. Even boys' egos are very fragile. So I think that it is important that firstly, we recognize ourselves that our pride is our Achilles heel. And of course, when you have under stress or you have needs, hopefully your spouse will attempt to understand your needs, and of course do unto others what you want others to do unto you. The one important thing is not compare. So spouse should not compare their husbands to other people, and likewise the husband shouldn't compare their wives to other standards and that sort of thing, because we are all on our own journeys in life. So the whole idea is that hopefully both parties in a relationship will be able to be sensitive to the needs of the other party, because certainly our lives in Singapore is stressful. One of the most stressful things I think in modern society, not just Singapore but all industrialized nations, is that there's a growing disconnect, a growing lack of community, sense of being part of a bigger group as opposed to just your nuclear family. And so this idea that you need to be able to connect and be understood, be accepted, and it's okay not to be okay sometimes. Yeah. I think that is very important.
That's true. So, the expectations that we place on our spouses, right? We need to be careful how we manage that, and also this need for support group, like you mentioned, right? I think that's very useful. For myself, I'm also in a little bit of a support group with other men who are also fathers, and we journey together, meeting once a week over Zoom and sometimes physically, and we just go through certain reading materials for sharing and for enrichment, and at the same time we share the challenges we've been facing, and we see how we can actually help each other, perhaps if necessary, to overcome these challenges. And I think I found that very useful.
Yes, and I think bros out there, I think it's important that bros learn to be bros for your bro.
Right.
Because sometimes I think even guys, one of the reasons why guys can't talk to guys very well is because the other guy doesn't respond appropriately to it, and they're very uncomfortable with talking about the touchy-feely things.
Don't share your vulnerabilities with me.
I don't know how to handle that. Maybe for me, because I work in mental health, so I guess I'm more in tune with some of these things. But I can also imagine for some other guys, it is difficult to talk about these things, and they really do not know how to respond to things like that. So I think I think bros need to also learn how to be there for their bro.
So after today, you might find a lot of people calling you to check with you. Can you be part of the support group? Well, it's been quite interesting talking about the needs and challenges that fathers face and so on, right? Perhaps before we end, do you have any tips, any last words, so to speak, for fathers, before we end this episode?
I think fathers, and I say this for myself as a father too, we play a very pivotal role in our families and the upbringing of our children. Your children will learn from your behavior, both good or bad behaviors. So we must know how important we are in the leadership of the household. I think since this is a Catholic forum, I think I dare say that we should try our best not to fall into, especially when you're stressed, to fall into the addictions of alcohol, pornography, computer gaming, gambling. These things are very detrimental to the household. We should also really try not to, do things that will jeopardize the marriage, because again, it's very traumatic for the child. So this is something that should be seen as a responsibility and something that's really at the top of each father's mind. Their important role they have in the good outcome of their children's upbringing.
So perhaps summarizing that part of what you said, it would seem, and it would be very important that we as men have a very strong connection with our Lord, who is really the perfect example of what a husband should be, all right? And the father, our Lord, who is the husband of the church, right, spouse of the church, and being very connected to the church as well, all right, and drawing strength from her through the word, through prayer, through sacraments, right, and then also being close to their wives, the spouses, to really build on their marital relationship and not do anything else that might risk that relationship, right? Which is so pivotal and important for the family. And finally, that connection with the children. All right. So I guess these four important parts: the connection with Christ as the foundation, connection with the church, connection with spouse, and that connection with children. I think these are things that we really need to work on to really. In our efforts to become better fathers and husbands, right? And children of God.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Christopher. It's been a very wonderful and enlightening again to have you with us on this podcast to talk about the role and challenges for fathers, right? Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. So there we have it. We've just had Dr. Christopher Cheok, a psychiatrist, senior consultant and chief with the Department of Forensic Psychiatry at the Institute of Mental Health, who just shared with us in a rather light-hearted manner today on the role and challenges for Catholic fathers. So till we meet again, take care and God bless you and your family always. Bye-bye.